Dr. Jazz.
Yeah. But man, thanks for finding the time. Appreciate it.
Well, it's a perfect day for it.
Yeah. Here we had like 28 degrees Celsius. So I don't know. That's in Fahrenheit. That's
Where
summer. I'm in Slovenia, Maribor.
Ah, great.
Like, you probably played in Ljubljana, I guess. So
I played in Ljubljana in the 1970s.
whoa, really? With whom?
Mhm. I was there with Roscoe Mitchell
Oh man,
ensemble. Yeah.
that's amazing. Wow. Okay. Yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, I want to touch Roscoe also later and Braxton and all those guys, how you ended in that circle. But I wanted to start this talk first with what's been happening on the band leading department. Have you been preparing something new? I mean, I love your work as a band leader, but maybe I missed a record or something. But what's been happening there?
Well, I'm in the middle of a bunch of things. It's all at the same time. My head is starting to explode because I'm going to Japan at the end of May with the band with a quintet, and we're going to record an album at Body and Soul. And then I have to go. As you may know, I'm going to be I'm going to be in Croatia.
Oh yeah, Luis told me. Bonilla. Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think our connection is not great. You just froze.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Now you're back.
I hear you. Okay. So.
And then let's see. Then I have to go to WDR, doing the West Deutsche Rundfunk with I'm actually writing a program right now for a trumpet player named Peter Samoa from Ghana, and so that's the big band stuff. And then I have to go to Taiwan. I'm doing a program there with a group from Taipei that we do pretty much every summer at the National Taiwan Concert Hall. Oh. So it's a lot of writing, and finishing up school here at Queens College and at Juilliard. Oh. So everything happening all at the same time. I just got married just this past week.
Oh man, congrats. Okay, so that's busy times. Yeah.
My partner Nancy Kell, we finally tied the knot.
Yeah, come on, that's nice. Yeah.
We had friends and family over, and it's been pretty much a week of social.
Yeah, beautiful, huh? Yeah. When is this new record gonna come out? Like end of this year or next year? Or?
Oh, I don't know how long it takes for albums to come out. There's always production and rights and liner notes and just all that other stuff.
Yeah.
All I know is we write the music, we play, and we record, and then.
Yeah.
The record industry is a very different thing than it used to be when I was a kid. It's doesn't work the same way. But we still make recordings, we still make albums, because if you're going to be an artist, you got to make art. So
exactly. Yeah.
We'll hear it one way or another.
Yeah. It's a nice way to document where you are as an artist in the stage, even though I don't know if it's selling anymore or not. I'm like really puzzled these days. Also, what's the?
I don't think record sales are what really drives it. I think live performance and teaching. Yeah. There's other ways to make money, but if you don't, I mean, the goal of what we do is to make music and to share it. So regardless of whether it's a source of income, or probably in most cases it's more of an expense.
Exactly.
But it's still something that we have to do, because if you don't make music, then how can you be a musician if you don't make music?
Mm-hmm.
And recording focuses your you make decisions, and you kind of it's a focal point of what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when I write for my small group albums, when at both my schools that I teach at, particularly this jazz theory class I teach at Juilliard, I prepare a lot of musical examples of concepts, because I don't like to teach dry concepts. So I like to try to show them in context. So I write songs around the concepts that we're working on. And a lot of times those wind up being tunes. And I've kind of discovered in this process of writing songs that way how focused and how other composers were clearly doing the same thing. Particularly, I talk about Wayne Shorter as being someone who was very clearly that he was working on particular concepts and did, you know, a remarkable job of innovating within these different musical models.
Yeah,
it's really clear how clear his thinking was. Herbie Hancock and even people like Horace Silver, how good their songwriting was when what they were trying to do, how their songwriting process was really sharp, really well done. Yeah.
These guys were really composers also, in a sense that I think Wayne wrote every day, right? Composed, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would call him Weird Wayne because of the way he spoke and the way his sound was compared to other players. But you can tell his thinking was really very well organized. I would have loved to have been able to meet like a 23-year-old Wayne Shorter and just sit down and just talk and find out like what was he thinking about? What was he? Because obviously his mind was working on another level.
Yeah, already those records, the Blue Note stuff. I mean, that's all those tunes there, from Speak No Evil to Gaucho, everything. Like, it's just like, yeah, such a language. Yeah, it's beautiful, man. Yeah. Well, was Wayne one of the guys that got you excited also? I mean, when was for you the moment that you said like, shit, I want to play this music? Do you remember? Was there like, was it Miles or whoever? Or...
And when I mean, I didn't, you know, I learned how to play the trumpet listening to the radio. Fortunately, where I grew up in kind of just outside of Philadelphia, we got radio station. Temple University had a 24-hour jazz station called WRTI, and I didn't even know the music was called jazz. That's how hip I was. But I was playing the trumpet, and I didn't like trumpet lessons very much because I didn't like the music that we were playing in lessons. It was that silly music that the kids play. But I would go around the radio and look for trumpets, anything with a trumpet in it, and I found this jazz station. So I used to actually record stuff on a reel-to-reel tape recorder. If I liked it, I quick turn on my tape recorder and I would play along. And they were playing all kinds of stuff. But the first stuff I heard was, you know, like Maynard Ferguson and, you know. But then at a certain point, I remember hearing Freddie Hubbard. When I heard Freddie Hubbard, it was just like, all the lights went on, and I tell my students that, you know, I used to get albums and I would put them on and I would sit and I would play along with them, not knowing anything about what I was doing, just trying to play along. And sometimes I closed my eyes and, you know, pretend that the guys were actually there. And then one day I opened my eyes and they were there, not in my house, but, you know, I was on stage with these people like Jimmy Heath and Freddie Hubbard and, you know, Joe Henderson and McCoy Tyner and you know, and just it's like wanting to be an astronaut when you're a little kid and then you wake up one day and you are an astronaut. Like, how does that happen? But yeah, so that was my introduction. I mean, I love Maynard Ferguson's sound. You know, that very high, electrifying kind of sounds always resonated with me because I've done a lot of lead trumpet playing, so I really love that. But something about Freddie Hubbard's sound and articulation and and also the songs that he wrote, because Freddie was also an amazing songwriter. So something about that Blue Note period, the Blue Note period of you know, in the 60s, that music really, that, and I would say Mingus's music, the two albums, and Dynasty from 1959, those two albums also really had a deep impact. And big band writing too. I listened to a lot of Slide Hampton from an early age. In fact, my earliest recollection was hearing "Frame for the Blues," which is something that Slide Hampton had written for Maynard Ferguson. So these things were kind of deep in my DNA as a musician.
Well, yeah, that's a good way to learn to listen, just and play along. I mean, that's so nice. I think.
Then of course, you know, once I came to New York, I started playing a lot of Afro-Cuban music, a lot of Latin jazz, and so then I got introduced to the whole Machito and Mario Bauza and Tito Puente, and so that became, you know, a passion as well. So that was really definitive, as far as, you know, just things that as a player are just so much fun to play. So, And also the thing about it is, you start, if you're lucky enough, you get to understand music as something that's made by people, and especially if you get to meet the people who made the music,
Yeah.
then the music takes on a kind of a very personal connection, which is wonderful to have.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, like you said, I check out the records today that I have you on, and it's like I think I have like 35 CDs with you on. And I was like, shit, man, you've played with everyone basically. So,
Yeah, I feel like the Forrest Gump of jazz.
Oh my God. But when did you move to New York, by the way? Like, when was that?
Well, I got out of college. Like January or February of 1982, I did a double degree at Oberlin College,
82.
and then
Okay.
I moved to Chicago, and I started studying there with Vince Chickwitz from Chicago Symphony, and was thinking about being an orchestral player, but I learned how to be a professional player, and I spent 2 years there, and then circumstances give me the opportunity to move east and go to graduate school. So I moved back east because I'm originally from the East Coast of the United States. And I went to graduate school and immediately started. I was fortunate enough that people opened the door for me in New York, and I started playing on Broadway. I started doing commercial recording. And then in 1985, I got signed by Blue Note with Out of the Blue.
Yeah, exactly.
And it just, I don't know, it was kind of a magical time when there was, all these mentor bands. I got to sit in with Art Blakey, and then I've got to, play with Art Blakey and so with them, and I got to play with Art Silver. So there are a lot of mentor bands at that time. Betty Carter mentored a lot of young musicians, and of course there were big bands.
Yep.
Lionel Hampton's band I played with, and of course later the Carnegie Hall Jazz Band and Jazz at Lincoln Center. There were a lot of these bands that kind of provided a stepping stone for young musicians who were getting into the business to actually play with older guys and just kind of understand where style came from. Basie band and the Ellington band, of course, was active as far as that, and players would join and spend time in those bands. And it really was sitting on the bus with a guy like Frank West or Joe Wilder or John Faddis.
Yeah.
People who are walking history books, who really knowledgeable, and you could really get into this very substantive conversations about music. So that was a part of the education. Now most of that is kind of moved into the schools, because most of the people that I came to New York with in the early 1980s, they're almost all professors. So a lot of what we did on the road, traveling around and talking and rehearsing and talking to each other, a lot of that happens in school now. In some ways that's better, in some ways it's not so good. There's pluses and minuses to the way it's done.
Yeah, well, at least you're sharing the I think that's why I do these talks, because it's part of jazz is sharing these stories and what you guys learned. I think that's good that you're teaching, at least that you're spreading what you learned from the original masters, actually, so.
Most of the guys that I know who are teaching around in New York are really good. I mean, people that actually play music and have a long-term contact with each other and are actually sharing ideas. And also, we realize that a lot of times that some of the students that we're working with, at Queens College, a lot of my students are professional players that just want to get a master's degree. So I've had people like Chris Cheek and Joe Martin and Arturo Farrell and Conrad Herwig, the guys who are, they're not going to school because they don't know how to play. So there's that. And also at Juilliard, I get these kids that are, from a very young age, are unbelievable. Their talent and ability is just staggering. But there's still things that they don't know. So our job is pretty much to try to tie the things together and give the examples that were meaningful to us, but also understanding that there are things that they're doing that are all equally meaningful, and trying to create this community, which is not so much a hierarchical community, but more of a sharing, an intergenerational and intercultural sharing of information, which is, I think, education at its best.
Yeah, especially in jazz, I think that's so important. you know. And but
Plus the other thing that
yes, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
that was just one of the other things is, of course, is with teaching as a career, which was not open to jazz musicians for so long. This allowed musicians to be able to actually make a respectful living, which there, when I came to New York, there were players who were famous players, amazing players who were really struggling. They just try to make a living. They gave everything to the music, but they weren't able to sustain even the the kind of a lifestyle that most basic working people have. So in some ways, the opening up of the academic world to jazz musicians has been extraordinarily helpful to the music, allowing people to live.
Yeah, true. Yeah, you spend so much time playing this music and practicing the instrument, and so it's good. Yeah, we got to pay the bills as well. So
yeah, and we get kids. The kids come along.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
they don't care that you play a trumpet. They just want to go to school and eat and get clothes and live their life.
Exactly. True. Yeah. Yeah. Michael, I just wanted to go. You mentioned Roscoe Mitchell before, and how did you end up on those late 70s recordings, like with Braxton, the Creative Orchestra, and because I think I checked the records I have, I think this is the first one I saw your name. I think it's 78, like, and the list of players on that Cologne, it's just like.
Yeah, Kenny Wheeler was in that band. I'd
Yeah,
never heard
man.
of Kenny.
How was that like?
Sitting next to Kenny Wheeler in the trumpet section, I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
And you were 19 or something.
George Lewis was playing trombone, and Ray Anderson was in there. Yeah, there were and Leo Smith. There were so many amazing players. But when I was in college, I went to Oberlin College, and Anthony Braxton came through to do a workshop there. Our professor was named Wendell Logan, and he was an unusual jazz professor at that time. It wasn't even a jazz program. They didn't have a jazz program at Oberlin at that time. They do now. But he brought in Anthony Braxton as a guest, and I participated in a bunch of workshops. And at the end of the workshops, he said, "Hey, I'm bringing a big band to Europe. Would you like to come with me?"
Wow.
So I said, "Sure." And my teachers were kind enough to allow me to disappear from class for 2 weeks, which is something that I think about a lot when I'm teaching. Being flexible with players who have teaching, have performing opportunities while they still have to do the work. But anyway, so then I kind of got introduced to Roscoe Mitchell and people who were in what was considered the avant-garde at that time. And when Roscoe put together a big band the next year, I went along with them. And later he had a big band. He had a small group called the Sound Ensemble.
Yeah.
And he asked me to join him for that. And that I learned a lot from playing with Anthony and Roscoe, because they weren't dealing with the same kind of forms and tonality, and their means of improvisation was, they stripped away a lot of the cliche and a lot of the formulaic stuff that people kind of use, and you just kind of have to deal with what's in front of you, which I still think, whether you're dealing with harmony, jazz harmony or not, what really makes someone special is what they add to the language. And I think those guys just dealing with the moment, being in the moment, I guess was, and also their technical proficiency and their projection of energy and personality is on par with anybody else, regardless of style of music or what the structure of the music is.
Yeah,
they really had a lot to say, and when you're around musicians who are saying something like that, that you have to figure out, what am I going to say, and that's important.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Anthony, because I know Kenny was, Wheeler, he's one of my favorite composers and players ever. So I just wanted to hear you say, how it was with that band, because I think you were the youngest guy in that group, probably. So
not anymore.
Yeah,
I remember when I used to be the youngest guy all the time. That didn't happen anymore. Yeah, but it was striking to hear someone whose playing was so unusual, so unique, and so original, and at such a high level, and also who's just a great person to be around. Very intelligent, soft-spoken person, but a real beast in the trumpet section. He was you know, that was very challenging music.
Yeah.
But it was great to see all these people, you know, with their own unique approach to music. I think that made a difference. But then also on that same tour, I remember hearing Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers live for the first time.
Okay.
In Germany, and that was that just made everything go explosions, and you know, it was just such a marvelous thing to see them and hear that music live. It was just something I'd never had the chance to do before.
Yeah, yeah, I can believe. I mean, yeah. How did Out of the Blue happen, and what did that mean for you? You know, because you guys signed for Blue Note, obviously, and the band was killing. Like, how did you end up in that band, and how was that like for you?
Well, you know, up until the late 1970s, into the early 1980s, it was very difficult for young musicians to get signed by a label because you know, labels weren't really taking a chance on developing new talent. They just wanted to record, you know, people who had a track record of record sales and big festival performances. But then Wynton Marsalis came to town, and suddenly he was attracting a lot of attention. So people, I think a lot of record companies decided that, hey, there's a market for, you know, for young talent, especially in schools. You know, young kids hear these young people who are just a few years older than they are, and they get this idea of, wow, this music is open for me. So I think Blue Note, which had just kind of re-emerged because they were doing a lot of reissues, reissues of older albums, they decided to take a chance and develop a house band, like their, you know, their own answer to the young generation. And they held a national audition. So they sent out for tapes and, you know, all kinds of tapes, and a bunch of people sent in tapes, and I sent in one. And then they picked a rhythm section, which I think originally was Harry Pickens on piano, Bob Hurst on bass, and originally Louis Nash on drums.
Oh, really?
And then we brought a bunch of horn players. So there was like a stellar group of invited, you know, horn players to come in and play. And I was one of them. And, you know, I guess the way I heard it was the rhythm section picked the horn players. So they picked Kenny Garrett, Ralph Bowen, and me to play. And that's how we got started. We got signed to Blue Note, and they gave us, you know, pretty good support in the beginning. It was a little unorganized because we had a manager that was kind of not really on top of it. And also you know, Louis Nash bowed out and Ralph Peterson joined the band. And there were some conflicts within the band. There's a lot of egos in the band. I mean, we had some really great players. And, you know, everybody was kind of in the process of, like, Bob Hurst went off with Wynton, and Kenny Garrett went off with Freddie Hubbard and Miles Davis. And, you know, so everybody kind of was in the process of developing all these other things. So it was hard to keep a band together. And eventually I decided to not do that. I decided to go. I had an opportunity to go off with Horace Silver, and you know, and you know.
How did Horace find out about you?
The saxophone player who was playing in Out of the Blue, Ralph Bowen, was playing with us. And yeah, these other guys. So you know, when Horace was looking to change up his horn players, Ralph said, "Hey, you should check out Mike." So actually, I went out and auditioned. So that was another audition.
How was that like?
I flew out to yeah, it was funny because I actually got to stay at Horace's place, and I met Gregory, his son Gregory. You know, the song "Gregory Is Here."
Yeah.
Well, I went out to Horace's place. Gregory was there, and you know, and Gregory said, "Hey, man, I want to tell you something. I hope you win." And my father doesn't like a lot of notes, so you know, so I went in there, and you know, all these guys were just like hammering away, and I just kind of played some bluesy stuff, kind of chill, and you know, Horace dug it. So, and then we wound up being quite close. Horace was interesting guy, but I really enjoyed my relationship with him. He's another really smart songwriter, like amazing songwriter.
Yeah. How was he like a band leader to you guys, to you younger guys?
He was a great mentor. You know, I mean, you know, his way of playing was not the only way of playing, but it was his way of playing. And his band had a sound. And of course, you heard different bands had different styles between when, you know, like when Joe Henderson or when Shaw was there, or when the Brecker Brothers was there, or when it was, you know, Blue Mitchell and, you know, Junior Cook, you know, those those band, every band had a sound, but there was a certain element of blues in the music, which a lot of players don't ever really get. With Horace, you had to play the blues one way or another. You had to play the blues, and it had to make it, and you had to make it real, and not play the blues like you're apologizing for it, which a lot of young players want to be too hip for the blues, I guess. And the music kind of loses its center. But with Horace, you had to make musical statements. You had to not miss any chord changes, and you had there was a certain feeling in the music, which he provided playing piano. I never heard anybody comp the way that Horace comped. His playing was so propulsive and funky, and Horace used to sweat like you never believe. Of course, he had some physical things. He had scoliosis, but at the end of the set, the water would run off his elbow in a stream. You never wanted to hug Horace Silver after a set. I can tell you that, because you'd be wearing Horace for the next set. But he was wonderful to play with.
Yeah.
I think of the two piano players that I think that comp the hardest was probably Horace Silver and McCoy Tyner. And maybe Rowan Hanna too. Rowan Hanna had another level of swing too. He was another great pianist who was at Queens College when I was there. So yeah, he was also quite amazing. But Horace was so funky. I never heard anybody funky than Horace.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, that you got to experience that, to play basically with one of the, who started the whole thing almost. This.
Well, I think the thing is, is you start to realize one of the advantages of playing with you. I mean, it sounds great. I played with this one, I played with that one, but I think more important was that you get to know these musicians as people, and you start to feel the connection between their music and their personality. I got to play with Dizzy Gillespie. I played in Dizzy's band, and you got to see that Dizzy wasn't just Dizzy on records. He was Dizzy Gillespie all the time. Everything he did was Dizzy doing stuff. So you got to see how people weren't trying to be, they just were. Like an apple tree doesn't try to be an apple tree, it just is an apple tree. And these musicians, their music comes out of them because it's who they are. And it's like honest. There's a certain honesty in the music, which gives you hope, because you can just be however you are. You just kind of focus it and try to figure out how to be the best version of it. And that's what makes it believable. Like actors, like acting.
Yeah.
Best actors, you just believe them.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. If you make it from the heart like these guys did, I think, that's why they're still there. Their music, at least, So, yeah.
Well, I tell students, that it's important that you have the mechanics and the theory and the technique and all this stuff, but that's not really why people come to hear you.
Yeah.
They come to hear you because they want connection. They want to feel connection. And if you provide that connection, it's like people are coming to see you because they want to visit a friend, or they want a personal experience that makes them feel connected.
Yeah.
So you use all these tools and all these techniques and stuff as a content, but what really want is you got to find a way to connect on a human level. And that's something that you have to work on, working on synchronizing your sound with other people, and also creating connection with the audience. It's all about connections within the band and from the band to the public. That's really what it's a real human experience.
Quite missed, I think, the last 20 years, at least in many cases. It's gone.
Yeah, during COVID, especially, everybody tried to make the music still happen, remotely. And I think everybody realized how unsatisfying it is. We really didn't realize what we had to be able to just go in any space, any number of people, and just be together and play music and enjoy each other's company. It's
privilege.
Yeah, something that we, may very well stand the AI revolution. We'll see.
Yeah, that's another story, man. That's like shit. Yeah, I was just talking with my wife today also. This Scandinavian Airlines story that was going on. I was like, shit.
No, I didn't follow.
Yeah, it's like they basically, their playlist consisted of, you know, when you listen to music on the plane, consisted only of AI jazz, no jazz artists. It was just like various artists. So, you know, because nowadays I guess a program can just like, you know, write songs in the style of Horace Silver, I guess.
Of course they can.
That's scary.
I tell my students at Juilliard, I say, look, you know, the things I'm teaching you can be done by AI.
Yeah.
Now your job is adding the part that's not done by AI. So yeah, I mean, you know, when you talk about different techniques and styles and you know, just how things are made, the structure of things in architecture or in medicine or in law, all those things can be reproduced by AI. So your job is the adding the part that's not AI. And some people will be satisfied with nothing but AI. Some people are satisfied with, you know, just like some people are satisfied with junk food. And, you know, people are just, it's so to some extent, we're you know, you have to think about who your audience is going to be. People who are, you know, more discerning. That's going to be this generation's greatest challenge, is maintaining what we consider the human experience in the face of technology, which has always been there's always been work that's been replaced by technology. Always been. This is just that this is more all encompassing.
Yeah.
But it's still the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I wanted to ask you one thing. When did you start leading bands, and how did Spring Dance happen? I mean,
well, you know, I was with Blue Note, and then after a while, the relationship was not really being. We were signed to Blue Note through a manager, and this manager was not really doing a good job. So, and it was time to let go of that. And again, of course, I went off with Horace Silver. So, we ended that band, and I was kind of waiting around for another recording opportunity, and it came in an unlikely way. I had played in 1989, 1990 with the Philip Morris Super Band. We went on a world tour, all over the place, which was amazing. I got to play with, you know, Johnny Coles and Sweet Edison and James Moody and Ray Brown and James Morrison, and there was all these, you know, Eddie Burt. There was so many great players in this band. But anyway, the guy who put that tour together was named Aliardo Buzzi, who was actually was president of Philip Morris, which was funny because there's a lot of virulent anti-smokers in the band. But they said they said the tour wasn't about cigarettes, because it was Miller beer and craft foods, and they gave us this whole, didn't matter. We all went. Anyway, Aliardo, he was a real jazz fan. He was an honest to goodness Swiss guy who just loved jazz, and he decided to start his own label. Which is a great way for, you know, a rich guy to lose a lot of money, but he wasn't worried about it. So he partnered up with a classical label called Claves, and they created Claves Jazz. And he told me that they were going to start a label, and he wanted me to be their first artist. And he basically gave me an unlimited budget to choose the band.
Oh wow! Okay.
I was like, okay, well, let's get, you know. So I got, you know, a really stellar band.
Oh man!
And got to just write whatever I wanted to write, and, you know, had a sextet. So yeah, and I did a couple albums with him, some Mama Soho and Spring Dance. Yeah. But that's how those albums started. And
did you also do tours and gigs with those groups, like, or
very little,
okay.
Only around New York, because by the time I was doing that, yeah, that's when I really started getting more busy as a writer. Started doing a lot of arranging, and I also saw from my friends who were leading bands that generally, as a band leader, what would happen was you came home with less bread than everyone else. You paid your side people, and you paid everybody off, and then, you know, and I was a young father at that time, and I was, you know, so I was under pretty serious financial strain. So I realized that leading bands and I mean, if I stuck it out, it probably would have worked out well, but I had this other path of writing that was opening up when I started writing for Mario Bauza, and then I started writing for Tito Puente, and then the Carnegie Hall Jazz Band. So I suddenly had this other world of writing kind of opened up, and I wanted to be home with my daughter. I had, you know, a young daughter, and being a father for me was important, and I saw a path that would allow me to play music and be active in New York and tour when I wanted and not tour when I didn't want. And then I wound up, teaching at Queens College when Jimmy Heath retired from Queens College. He wanted somebody there that was going to keep his arranging the composition part of the degree together. So we played together a lot with Hampton. So it was important. So I saw how a lot of young players were kind of on a treadmill, that they were just running and running and running and running. And I thought, you love to play. There's no question. Playing is great. But I wanted to have other options, and I saw another path, which ultimately has worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
Pretty good style and get a creative lifestyle and get to play and I get to write and I get to have family life. And it's like everything that I ever wanted is kind of more happening. So that's unusual. I try to tell my students that, you look at the magazines and you paint an example of what success is, and you don't really know what you see on the outside. And social media, of course, everybody puts themselves into the best light. You don't really know what, you have to define success for yourself. You have to figure out what's going to make you happy, what's going to be fulfilling and contribute. And once you work, and that's in some ways it's the hardest part of an artist's career, is just figuring out like what do you want,
what works for you. Yeah. I get you. I have a 1-year-old daughter now, so it's also
congratulations.
For me. Thanks. Yeah, for choosing gigs and stuff. I'm like turning. I teach as well. I love teaching. So I can be home then as well, and I want to be at home as much as I can. And I mean, I love to play music, of course, but it's just like you said, like this. It's hard, but you see what works for you and what you really like. So it's important.
Well, children and students are kind of like your works of art too.
Yeah.
It's except that you find that you get started and then they kind of go off the way they want to go, and that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You see. But teaching is an interesting challenge. It's like playing and it's like writing, except other people doing it.
Yeah, true. Yeah. It's nice to see your former students always like, shit, wow, he made an album, he made a tour, he's playing now with these guys, and I'm like always like, damn, that's amazing, man.
After 26 years of teaching at Queens College, I'm always amazed at how many of my students have a lot of them are getting getting up there in age already, and it's amazing how many of them have done quite well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, nice to see. Yeah.
You see them doing commissioned works and writing things for film and television and radio and touring and raising families of their own. And teaching, and it's amazing how many of them are still in the business, and it worked out for them. That makes me so happy to see that.
Yeah. That's nice. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Michael, you mentioned all these amazing players like Tito Puente and, Eddie Palmieri, you play Ray Barretto, and your immersion in the Latin scene. How did that initially happen? And I mean, especially with Michel Camilo, I think I have like 6 CDs with Michel, and you making these crazy arrangements, and the music is so heavy, I think. And the arrangements are so heavy. Like, how did you end up working with Michel, and also in general in Latin field? I mean, what led you there?
Michel thing and Latin music are somewhat. It doesn't sound like it would be, but it's somewhat separate. Because when I started playing with Michel Camilo because Lou Soloff, who was great trumpet player, with Blood, Sweat, and Tears,
yeah,
so an amazing musician.
One of the best, yeah.
He was a trumpet player playing with Michel. And they were kind of peers at one point because Michel was young and they had a band together. They played with Peter Gordon in a band called French Toast together. And Michel was kind of in his ascendancy. And Lou, when I came to New York, Lou and I became friends. Lou was really helpful to me. John Faddis and Lou were amazing to me as far as giving me opportunities. But Lou needed someone who could sub for him in Michel's band, and that was not an easy task because the music was I never even really could play that kind of music on the trumpet until I started playing with Michel, and it was because I heard Lou doing it that I understood how to do that. But then after a while, Lou and Michel just kind of I don't think Lou was ready to be working with a band leader, Michel. He was ready to work with Michel as a side man in a band, but I don't, they saw themselves as equals. Michel was not, he was becoming a very, exacting band leader. So
Yeah.
Michel just started asking me whether I would play, and it was uncomfortable for me at the time. I remember because I saw Lou as a mentor, and but that's how I started playing with Michel. But as far as Latin music is concerned, I mean, we patched that up later because we did big band stuff, and I always got Lou on. So I got their friendship back together again, which I was very happy about because that was a real source of stress for me. But yeah, we did a bunch of tours together, Japan with Lou, and that was a lot of fun. Lou was wonderful.
Yeah.
But the Latin thing, if you came to New York at a certain time, you would play Latin music because if you could play high notes on the trumpet, you were going to work. There's a lot of, the Latin community really loved live bands. Yeah, it's just, there was so much, salsa bands every weekend you could work. That's how I paid for school when I was in graduate school. It's how I made a living. But at a certain point, the Machito Orchestra came to my school, and Machito was still alive. And I had never heard Afro-Cuban big band before. I'd never heard. I mean, it's amazing that they didn't really talk about that in history of jazz. They just skipped over all the Afro-Cuban stuff completely, which is another story. But when I heard that band, I just marched myself up to the stage after their concert, and I just said, I got to play in this band. And they looked at me like, okay. And a couple of weeks later, they called me to make a gig. And I remember Machito standing behind me the whole time, like with his arms folded, looking at me, listening to me. And then the lead trumpet player left to move to Denmark, and suddenly I was the lead trumpet player in the Machito Orchestra. Wow. And I didn't know it, but once you played with a band like that, you became part of a family because a lot of the original players were still alive. This is like the early 1980s. So Eddie Palmieri and Ray Barretto and Tito Plant, these guys were all around. So Victor Paz, who was a lead trumpet player, from Panama, got me onto Mario Bauza's band. I didn't even know who Mario Bauza was. I was just this old guy with a band. I didn't know anything about the history of this stuff. It's really shocking, actually, but it's true.
Yes. Yeah,
and I got my first school gig teaching at Rutgers, and I was writing for the school band because the band was kind of a dysfunctional mess, and so I had to kind of write for a weird instrumentation. And Mario sat next to me on the bus one day and saw me writing and said, "I like how you write for the bass. You're my arranger now." And next thing you know, I had to write some music for this classic band that had Chico Farrell and Ray Santos and all these great, Rene Hernandez, all these charts. But the guys in the band were generous with me. Guys like Bobby Sanabria and Joe Santiago and Marcus Persiani and all these these great players were shown, and Mario, of course, were teaching me how to write in clave.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, my music was being recorded by the founder of Afro-Cuban jazz, and that opened the door to all kinds of opportunities. So as it was playing as being a lead trumpet player that got me into the music, but it was the writing that kind of got me into my reputation in music, including writing for Michel, because Michel doesn't need anybody to write for him. Michel's an amazing writer. But I had opportunities to arrange some of his music for Westdeutsche Rundfunk, the WDR. Yeah. And so we've had a wonderful relationship together. And of course, I love Michel's music.
Yeah. Yeah, I love those arrangements too. That's so, I mean, the lines you wrote there, they're very tricky. I mean, if you listen to that stuff, that's like, damn, I love that stuff.
Yeah, Michel's own writing. It's interesting. His first album is One More Once. That's really is a classic. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about different ways of arranging because I have a style of arranging, and Michel has a different style of arranging. And just like Mingus had a style of arranging, and Slide Hampton had a style of arranging, Gil Evans had a style of arranging, and I all that music is in me because of it's just the air that I breathe. But it's interesting to hear all the different approaches, and I really enjoy that. Trying to funnel someone's music through myself, and it kind of comes out like a child. It has two different parents. Comes out that way. I find that one of the most enjoyable parts about music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so nicely put, man. Yeah, very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, it's like I don't know. You're quite one of the rare players because you know we talked now basically with about Anthony Braxton and Roscoe Mitchell. Then we're talking about the Latin scene. Then you did the straight ahead stuff. You did the kind of Horace Silver, his own world. Then, of
Yeah.
course, did all the big bands in New York, from George Gruntz to, I don't know, to Mingus to Bob Minzer. And that's like,
Bob Minster is another great mentor, another great
wow.
friend. One of the people who I would point to as being a model for me, who's both as a player, as a composer, and as a person. He's really switched on guy, and one of the nicest people that I know. And he was also a mentor early on. I played in Bob's band, one of the earliest bands that I played in New York.
Oh,
For
really?
some reason, we just wound up being always friends. I really admire his musicianship. It's just so just right down the middle as far as it's just like it just almost assumes a level of players. His music, when it's played by a really good band, is just transcendent.
Yeah.
He really, but it's not overdone. His music's never overdone. It's just what it needs to be, and it allows the players to be great players. Like Thad. I mean, he comes out of Thad. Bob comes very much out of Thad Jones, and that Thad was like that too. His band was part Thad, but also part the people playing the music, and it's because the music is structured that way to allow the players to be themselves.
Yeah,
So
to write for the players. I mean, kind of Duke's fashion, of course, or to arrange for the players. I mean, that always helps, right? If you know who the lead trumpet is going to be, or who the saxophonists are, and that's so important.
But it's funny with Bob's music. A lot of Bob's music also works with college bands, which is just the opposite. So he's unusual in that way. That and Thad too. That their music, when played by a really excellent bunch of musicians, is transcended, but it could also was accessible by younger players, which is great because then the players get to feel like they're included. They get to feel like they're part of it, that they can do it. That's an amazing experience for a young person to play music that they've heard on recording like that. It's not beyond them. This doesn't exclude them. That's an amazing thing that I think that Bob's music in particular has contributed to the musical landscape.
Yeah, I love his writing for Yellow Jackets or the big band stuff or the small groups. Actually, it's so beautiful. It's
he's got his own language. That's hard. That's a hard thing to do. Not a lot of composers can say that they have their own kind of harmonic language. Sound, you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, that's Bob Minster. Or that's Thad. That's Duke. Duke Ellington. Or that's or Horace Silver or Pat Metheny or guys that have their Lyle Mays. People that have a real sound and you hear it right away. And boom, Mingus is like, that's Mingus. Like, wow, that's very cool.
Yeah. I just listened today also to Secret Story, where you were a part of also. And
that was that was a very funny session because we had to play with the synclavier.
Ah, really?
He had all the brass stuff already recorded on the synclavier. So basically we were doubling the synclavier. Synclavier was like a new thing.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so we were kind of like having to match this electronic thing, and it was hard because it was funny. I remember we had when a zillion takes on that. Yeah,
it's a heavy tune, that one. I mean, like
I love it.
Yeah, that's See the World and the rest. Yeah, but
that's the first time I met Ryan Kaiser too. Ryan Kaiser has been playing forever with Wynton's band.
Yeah,
Ryan was in that trumpet. He was just a young kid who just come to town, and Pat's brother Mike Metheny was in the section too.
Yeah,
I remember it was new beginning of like a lot of new faces coming to New York at that time, and good ones too. Terrell Stafford and Sean Jones and Ryan Kaiser, all these young fire breathing trumpet players, which also had a lot to do with me kind of thinking like, hey, do I want to just spend my time like competing with these guys for the same gigs, or do I want to try to do something that's more in my own direction?
Yeah.
I mean, we love competing with each other, and we love that. That's part of playing the trumpet. But I also felt that professionally that it wasn't just going to be about like more people trying to get through the same door, which was kind of what started to happen.
Yeah, but like you said, you found your beautiful path of you're still doing it, and it's fantastic. It's It's amazing. But Michael, otherwise, not to take too much of your time, you mentioned Japan and a new recording a new album. Are you gonna have some gigs in Europe as well? I mean, I know you have that workshop in Croatia, but what about some tours or gigs?
It's funny. Every time I go to Europe, it's always there and back. Because mostly because either I have something else that I got to get ready for, or because of my teaching schedule here in New York. So whereas I used to do like 3-week, 4-week tours, it's unusual for me to do that these days. It's more go there, do a week, come back, go there somewhere else for a week, come back.
Yeah,
it's not the most efficient thing, but it does allow me to keep the things that I'm doing going.
and it's changed
At least during the summer, I have more freedom to do that. But this summer is like packed. Plus, the thing is, each of these projects that I do also involves like a lot of writing, so I need the time in between to just to get the work that people don't see. The sitting at the desk next to, because my wife's in there working at the desk, and we're somehow or other she can stand me plunking at the piano while she's doing her stuff. Then the dog here, Bubba, you can see. I'll show you Bubba. Yeah, there he is.
Oh yeah,
Jeez.
oh yeah.
There's Bubba.
Beautiful.
Yeah, everybody, we all tolerate each other's workflow.
Yeah, but yeah, cool. Well, otherwise, if you're in Croatia in the summer, I already talked to Luis. If you're gonna pass me here from Graz to Croatia, drop me a line and we'll get together. I live like in the wine region, so you can make a stop.
Lucky guy. All right. Are you from there originally? Is that just your hometown?
Yeah. I mean, we live like 4K away from the center, like on the top of a hill, basically in the vineyards. So I have rosé now here, so kind of sipping.
Yeah, I mean that's such a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah,
Really,
it is. Yeah.
Well, I do hope we get a chance to meet, and I'd love to hear more about what you're doing.
Yeah. Hopefully, we get to meet and have a drink together or something, just to chat. Even that would be nice.
Yeah. I'm sorry my wife can't come. Usually she travels with me when she can, but she's got something at the same time that I'm in Croatia. She would normally. She's been to Croatia before, but she's.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. She travels a lot.
Beautiful. Cool. Michael, thanks again for sharing some of these thoughts, man. Beautiful, and thanks again for taking the time.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you in person sometime.
Yeah, me too.
Dr. Jazz.